Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Singapore Spotlight Series number 2. My name is Sabrina Myers, and I am from Hot Hospitality Exchange. And this series is in collaboration and in conjunction with the Singapore Exhibition and Convention Bureau. Now, the past year, all of us have had to adopt technology to a greater level than ever before on a personal and even professional level. We have had to move from the in-person space to the virtual space for our events in order to continue to stay connected, stay informed, and continue business as usual. Now, virtual events definitely pose many challenges, but they also provide many opportunities. Now, during the second edition today of the Singapore Spotlight Series, we will be discussing with a panel of experts from different backgrounds about rising to the challenge of virtual events. Please do join the discussion to learn about how our expert panel has managed these challenges, as well as discovered the opportunities of virtual events. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping before we go on to introduce our fabulous guest speakers. You are on the Hubilo platform for this event and this discussion. We will be running 3 polls throughout the event. In fact, the first one I will be kindly asking my team to release now. Please do take the time to answer the polls, and all the results will be shared at the end of the session. And of course, the chat function is live, so please feel free to drop your comments and your feedback, any questions that you might have for our expert panel of who are here today. And we'll try to pull them out and hopefully answer all the questions and as many questions as we can. Now, we've got a wonderful, wonderful panel joining me today. And the first person that I would like to introduce you to is Michael Rodriguez. Michael, would you like to please introduce yourself and your role?
Thanks, Sabrina. I'm really honored to be here and to be part of this conversation today with yourself, Jane, and Ashanti. So I'm the Area Director of Northern and Southwestern Europe for the Singapore Tourism Board, and I'm based in the UK. So largely, the Singapore Tourism Board is an agency under our Ministry of Trade and Industry. And I'll say very broadly, our remit is to drive economic development via tourism. And a large part of that involves leveraging Singapore as a global Asia node for business and MICE. So I'm very happy to be here today to share some experiences that I have.
Now we'll move on to our second guest, Jane Cziborra, Head of Events from Alzheimer's Disease International. Jane, would you like to please tell everyone a little bit more about your organization and yourself?
So as you said, I'm the Head of Events at Alzheimer's Disease International, and we're based in the UK as well, but we're an umbrella organisation of national dementia Alzheimer's associations around the world with over 100 members. So a truly global organisation for which we have our international conference, which is one of the things I'll share with you later.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jane. And our third and final fabulous guest, Ashanti. Now, Ashanti, would you please introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your organization?
Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here with Jane, Michael, and Sabrina. Thank you for having me. My name is Ashanti Bentil-Dhue. I am the CEO of Eventmind, and we help companies to choose and use the right event technology for their hybrid and, of course, their virtual events.
Thank you very much, Ashanti. And thank you all for joining me here today, not just my wonderful guest panelists, but also everyone in the audience. Thank you for taking the time and joining us today on the platform to discuss taking on the challenge of virtual events. Now, a lot of businesses, organizations, and event professionals have had to move into the space of virtual events, me included. We've been doing a variety of hybrid events for years, but since the pandemic hit, the technology evolution and adoption has been at an all-time high. And it has brought a new reality and next normal of using virtual events in your event calendar. Today, we have 3 very different perspectives. Michael brings the perspective of a destination and a convention bureau. Jane brings the perspective of an event professional and organization who have had to recalibrate and deliver their event virtually. And Ashanti brings the perspective of an event technology expert that gives clients unbiased, platform agnostic advice, training, and support in the space of virtual events. Now, let's get started and get stuck into the questions. So my first question is for Michael. Michael, the pandemic has created challenges for many organizations within the industry. Can you tell us how it has impacted your organization in particular?
Yeah, for sure. For Singapore, we are a small domestic population, and we are much reliant on international commerce and our position as an international hub. So you're really right to say that the pandemic has greatly affected us. Just to set some context, in 2019, we had just come off a stellar year in terms of arrivals. So this whole pandemic has brought about a significant reversal if we look at that metric alone. On the MICE front, we had to pivot many of our events to virtual or hybrid formats. And I'm very pleased to say that we have taken some steps to resume MICE events, definitely prioritizing health and safety as we do so. Actually, in fact, right now, we are doing a MICE pilot event in Singapore, which is GeoConnect Asia. That's happening in Singapore right now. So through this whole pandemic, I think a key learning point for us is that the collaboration between government and industry is so important as we plan for the future, as we reimagine what future of business travel is going to be like. And the one key challenge that we faced is maintaining Singapore as a top of mind destination throughout this entire pandemic, and finding ways to position ourselves as that international node, albeit in like you said, a virtual way.
Absolutely, and very valid challenges. And so what steps, I know you just mentioned you did take some steps. So what steps did you take to explore the use of virtual events in destination marketing for Singapore?
Yeah, just to share a little bit of research. One research by Cziborra shared that the majority of event planners are investing in virtual events moving forward. And as a destination, I think we are also moving towards that area. Virtual events have become a necessary part of our strategy in the past year to engage our audiences. Just for example, we have pivoted our Singapore Food Festival event virtually, and this was the first time we did it in the 27-year history. So that in a way shows the importance of virtual events. And a huge step of this pivot into virtual events involves setting up the necessary infrastructure to ensure that our events could run and carry on virtually. And this is where I need to give kudos to the events industry in Singapore, because they have really taken the effort to scale this up. An example is obviously Marina Bay Sands. They created this hybrid events broadcasting studio late August, and this really enables us to then offer broadcast quality live streaming capabilities as we then look at virtual and hybrid events. And I just have to say that, although virtual events will never replace live events, it's still a very important part of our entire suite of platforms and services as we look for the future, because it offers us a great, convenient alternative, right? Because, as we look for the future, there's always going to be a part of audience that cannot attend live events, and for whatever reason, be it travel restrictions, cost, family, and having that virtual platform can always cater and reach out to that wider reach and bring a more lively event to Singapore. Yeah.
Absolutely. Not being able to travel is obviously definitely a huge challenge for destinations worldwide. And it's been wonderful to see Singapore embrace the use of virtual events, and the infrastructure is, being created there and developed there for it, as well as, and it's a wonderful way for them to continue, as you say, stay top of mind and stay connected with their audience. More on that in a bit, but now I'd like to move on to Jane from the Alzheimer's Disease International. Jane, can you tell us about the challenge you faced in your role and your planned event when the pandemic hit?
It was definitely a challenge, for sure. I mean, originally we should have been in Singapore for our conference in March, and it was really disappointing we couldn't be there. Beginning of the year, we started sort of hearing things about the virus and what's happening, and it was a real waiting game, but very conscious that events in March, we really need to do something. So the biggest challenge really is that uncertainty. We didn't know what was going to happen. Would people be able to travel? Do they want to travel? Is the venue going to be available to us? so much going on. And then for me, it was a matter of trying to plan lots of different scenarios when you didn't really know what was happening. So it was that extra work to try and plan. And really, we had two crunch points. There was one when we decided that we would postpone our conference. So there was a lot of decisions about what we would do there, speaking to our board, and that went to December. And then a bit later in the year, it's like, oh, it's still not going to happen, is it? And it's like, well, maybe it can. And then it was discussions with our board. Do we go hybrid? Do we postpone again? Do we cancel again? There's lots and lots of planning and waiting to see what was the best. In the end, we decided to go virtual. And I really think that was the best decision to do. But yeah, it was a difficult time for sure.
And in not doing the event as planned, or in person, or hybrid, or pushing it, or canceling it even, why did you choose to do it virtually?
For us, we had everything established. Our delegates were on board, our sponsors were on board, we had the program in place, and there was just too much uncertainty to be able to do it in person. But we really wanted to provide our delegates with that opportunity to have the education. That's what our conference is about, to have the opportunity to still meet, albeit virtually. And we just wanted to have everybody come together, really. And for us as well, our conference is now every 2 years. And so we wanted the most up-to-date information to be transferred 2 years down the line. The latest research on dementia is going to be different.
I think that's super interesting to hear the different perspectives from Michael as well as from you, Jane. I think it is, I think with your event, it is something that brings a community of like-minded professionals together for a specific purpose and cause. And, it is such a, how do I say, a pond, everyone comes together to network, connect, and exchange. And when that doesn't happen, because it does happen every 2 years, it kind of throws everything off, doesn't it? So it absolutely does, make sense to have it done virtually. So thank you for giving us both your perspectives. Shanti, my next question is for you. Now, being one of the leading experts in helping clients with virtual events and event technology platforms, can you tell us the biggest challenges that clients have been coming to you with specifically?
Sure, thank you. So I think one of the big ones, and it's really interesting to hear Jane describe the journey, because one of the big ones obviously was what to do in the first place last year. But now that we're settling somewhat into the climate we're currently in, the big decision often is what event technology to use. And I think that now there's a greater understanding, the market has matured, and so it's not a case of just choosing one piece of technology, it's about choosing your stack. So what group of technologies best helps you facilitate your virtual and then of course hybrid events. So the big challenge at the moment is knowing how and what to choose in the first place. I think the second challenge on from that, therefore, is how you negotiate yourself out of maybe existing contracts, because I think a lot of companies obviously bought technology at the beginning of the pandemic. They've learned a lot, their strategy has evolved, and actually maybe they've discovered other technologies that are a better fit or might be better value for money. So I think the second challenge we're seeing now is how do we switch, essentially? How can we do that in a smooth way? So that we are getting a better deal ultimately. And then I think the third challenge continues to be around how you either upskill your existing team to be able to facilitate virtual and hybrid events, or how you actually buy in the best support to help you facilitate your virtual and hybrid events.
Fabulous. And I think that ties in quite nicely with the same, with the question I'm about to ask you next, which is, what, according to your experience, are the top 3 questions that event planners need to be asking when moving from organizing an in-person event to organizing a virtual event? I mean, I think you touched on 3 very important points there, but can you tell us in terms of questions, what would they be?
Absolutely. I think the first question, has to be a very pragmatic, question, which is, what is different about this virtual event? Because what we saw in the early months of COVID, for example, is just this kind of rinse and repeat attempt at taking an in-person into virtual, which can't be done. And in actual fact, if you want to get the best from a virtual experience for your sponsors, for your attendees, you cannot just cookie cutter it. So I think it's about asking yourselves as a team, what is different about our virtual event? And then designing an event around that, as opposed to trying to replicate what was happening in person. And maybe actually I'll go a step further. How can this be different? Not what, but how can this be different from our in-person event? And then the second question you need to ask yourself is this a one-off, a first time, or a long-term strategy? This is often the question that gets missed. The reason why that matters is because the event design, the overall strategy that you want to put into place, the results that you're trying to engineer, and of course the technology that you choose is influenced by whether or not you're doing this virtual or hybrid event for the first time, in the long term, or indeed for one time only. Because sometimes the answers and the options that come up obviously differ according to whether or not that is, whether this is a one-time or a long-term thing as well. And then I think the third question that you want to be asking yourself as an event planner is really a question that you need to ask when you're in these sales demos with event technology companies, which is how much control and access do we have to the data? Data is incredibly important, not only from a privacy and security point of view, but also in terms of how you track the results that you're getting from your virtual and hybrid events, but also how you probably need to demonstrate return on investment for sponsors and partners. And so it's really important in those conversations with your chosen event technology partner that you understand and know how much control and access you have when it comes to that data.
Those are three very fantastic questions. Thank you, Ashanti. And I think the second one I didn't even have in my head. So that's brilliant. I love that, and it is important to know whether you're going to do it one-off or you're going to have a longer term strategy for it that you keep evolving. So we've certainly brought out to light the challenges that virtual events has posed. And a lot of us have faced these challenges. I could see a lot of nodding happening here in our space. So I can only imagine that the audience is nodding along as well. But it's important to also understand the large technological shift and adoption that's taken place over the last year. So my next question is for Michael. Michael, this month saw the first ever Singapore Imagine MICE virtual show. Could you tell us more about this?
Yeah, certainly, Sabrina. So this MICE virtual show was organized by us at ESTB. It was a two-day event that was held at the start of the month on the 3rd and 4th of March. And it's part of our efforts to catalyze the MICE industry's recovery. So basically, our hope was that international MICE players would use this platform to connect effectively with our MICE industry players over these 2 days to generate business opportunities and in a way collaborate to point us the way forward towards the recovery of our sector. I think touching on the part of experience and user journey and what we did on the platform, beyond just the business-related appointments, what we also did is to curate a series of live streaming tours and culinary masterclasses, some of our local chefs, to, in a way, as far as possible, bring that experience from Singapore to their homes. That's probably the next best thing. Since they can't come to Singapore, let's bring a little bit of Singapore to them.
Absolutely. And I took part myself in the Singapore Imagine MICE virtual show, and I absolutely loved it. I found it super engaging because as you said, there was lots of really interesting behind the scenes information and clips and video, and you could really go into people's houses and go into those establishments and really explore and discover Singapore. And I really loved that we were able to do it live, but we were also able to then, I guess, access the sessions and experiences on demand later. So that was really brilliant. So can you tell us more about what your vision was for this virtual event? And what were the objectives and goals for this event? Because I can imagine that they would be very different from those of an in-person event that you would organize on behalf of the association, of the organization.
Yeah. So our vision for the Singapore Reimagine MICE virtual show was to really demonstrate in a virtual setting, Singapore can still be relevant as an international node for MICE. I think goes back to the point of establishing ourselves as a global Asian MICE node. And in doing so, it's also to bring that Singapore experience to delegates around the world. I think people are just missing that physical touch, that connection with our fellow human beings and partners. So we thought that a platform would enable us to connect both international delegates as well as our Singapore suppliers together. And a key part, as I mentioned previously, is that we curated these 7 unique experiences to showcase Singapore, really. So that was also a key vision of ours. How can we then bring experiences and showcase Singapore in a different way? And like what Ashanti was mentioning, it's not you can't just cookie cutter it by converting a live event into a virtual event. So what we did is we specially curated and live cultural tours to some of our cultural precincts, such as Little India. We had a homegrown distillery called the Brass Lion Distillery do master classes with some of the delegates. We had Malcolm Lee, which is a chef of Candlenut, which is a first a 1-star Michelin restaurant, showcase a little bit of his cooking as well. And I think another interesting thing we did, which we found really successful, is that we introduced something called some experience kits. So beyond that virtual experience, we wanted something tactile that participants can actually touch and feel. And so what we did was we sent experience kits to these participants for them to, in a way, feel a little bit of the experience as well. So I thought that was a key part of how we in a way reimagine the entire event.
Absolutely, you did reimagine. And I was one of the lucky few who managed to get one of these experience kits. I'm still drinking that coffee. It is fabulous. It was amazing. And it was really wonderful, actually. I didn't realize I was getting a kit. So when I did get it, it was just really this different experience, right? Because you feel connected at a different level to a virtual event that you didn't think you would. So I really, really like that touch. And so can you share some outcomes or insight from the event?
Yeah, well, at least we think it was successful. Over the 2 days, we had over about 1,000 attendees from 36 countries logging in. They made over 2,300 connections in our networking hub, and we had 40 exhibitors attend the event. So it's the first time we're ever doing such a large-scale MICE virtual event, and I think for starters, we thought that it was rather successful.
That is fantastic. That's amazing results. So congratulations on that. And I know when I was participating in the live streams, I could see lots of flags from different countries and lots of comments going on. So I love the whole global aspect of being able to bring so many event professionals together and exploring Singapore. So my next question is for Jane. Jane, you've also delivered your event virtually this year. So can you tell us more about the event in terms of how it was set up, number of attendees, the whole kind of breakdown of what it looked like?
Yeah, sure. In the end, we ended up with 1,600 delegates, whereby we'd normally we're expecting 1,200 in person. The great thing to see was that we actually had people from over 120 countries, whereas normally, even though it's very international, we'd have about 60, 65. So we really broadened our reach, which was fantastic for us as an international organization. The conference ran over 3 full days, which is how we would normally do it. We had ummed about whether to change it, but this time we didn't. We had a combination of live and on-demand sessions. So we had over 30 live sessions. We would normally run 6 sessions in parallel, but we only ever did 2 in parallel at the time, not to distract our audience too much. We had 40 on-demand sessions, which meant recording nearly 250 speakers. There was a lot of content. We had 480 posters. We had a virtual film room as well. We had 40 exhibitors and sponsors, networking sessions. And then also, because we were virtual, we took the opportunity to offer translation through subtitles in Spanish and traditional Chinese as well. So there was AI translation, but it was something that we found quite useful and something to consider for the future.
Fantastic. That sounds amazing. And definitely sounds like a big, complex project for sure. And also from that perspective, I know that both your organization and SDB were supported by a fantastic agency in delivering your virtual events. So moving on to a question for Michael specifically with regards to the supplier that you worked with. Could you tell us more about which event organizations you worked with to bring the vision and concept of the virtual MICE show to life?
Yeah, so to bring that MICE virtual show to life, we partnered with established local event organizers such as MICE Neuro, Aspen Events Planners, and TLC Events. So combined, these EOs, they actually organized over 48 digital events between them the last 8 months. So we were really confident of their ability to deliver something tailored to our needs. And what they've also provided, as you mentioned, an event they help with production and management was the 2020 Alzheimer's Disease International Conference. So MICE Neuro was one of our key platform partners. And beyond just delivering the platform, they were a key partner to help us to co-curate some of the experiences on the platform, especially in terms of the user journey and the user experience. So we had some elements of gamification, for example, that we kind of thought would work in engagement and connectivity. What we also did is we partnered with another partner called MICE Depot, and this is a partner that pivoted their business into digital content creation, and they actually even invested in the development of their own in-house studio. So what we did with them was that we all the digital content and the live panel discussions were in partnership with them. So like adding on to what Ashanti said, or reinforcing what Ashanti said, right? It's about identifying your technology stack, your partners it's very critical that you can't do it alone. You have to rely on like-minded partners in a way to deliver in a way a holistic event.
Absolutely agree with that. It is about the stack. That is for sure. That's something that has to be a key takeaway that everyone who's watching today, takes away from this discussion. It is about the stack and making sure that you know what goes into your stack for your virtual events. Now, Jane, my next question is for you. Did you initially consider using an agency? And if not, why and at which point did you realize that this investment in an agency will definitely be worth it?
As we were looking into the different virtual platforms and how we were going to do it, we were actually considering doing it ourselves. We're a not-for-profit organisation, so budget was a big consideration for us, especially with the uncertainties of how things were going to go. But as we started exploring, we quickly realised that no, we really need the help of an agency. We didn't have the expertise. We didn't have the production knowledge, and I think that was a really big part of it, having that production expertise. We had so many sessions to record, so just that in itself we wouldn't have been able to do. We're a small team, so it helped us and had the reassurance to have that team behind us, which, as Michael said, was the MICE Neuro team, and they helped make it a much more professional event for us, as well as bringing in some other elements of creativity that we wouldn't necessarily have thought of or have the skills to deliver. So it was wonderful to have them on board. The best decision we made.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jane. Now, Ashanti, we have heard from two different perspectives, and I would love to bring you in now because I know we've spoken about this before in our very many chats that we have, but we talk about there being a significant knowledge gap right now with event planners in the space of virtual events. Can you talk more on this, and also how can this gap be slowly bridged or at least managed? I mean, I know a lot of it has to do with expectation and education.
Absolutely. And I think the gap really is the digital skill gap. And so what we see quite often is event managers, planners, and organizations make decisions that they're going to outsource the technological assistance that they need, which is fine if you have the budget to do so. But what we've observed is that lots of companies actually don't have the budget to pay, for external digital assistance. Now, what do I mean specifically? And this is something that we've talked about before. What I'm talking about is the fact that to launch a virtual event specifically, once you've bought your event technology or created the stack of technologies you're going to use, you still need a real human being to modify, customize, monitor, and manage those technologies. So what tends to happen is when you buy your technology, you get access to what is called a dashboard. So you use your username and password, you log in to the back end, you will see the dashboard. You have to create whatever it is you're looking to create on that virtual space, because whatever it is that you've seen in terms of other examples or even on the sales demo. So for anyone watching us right now, you may not be aware that there could be 2 or 3 pieces of technology running at the same time. There are individuals behind the scenes who are telling us when to speak, when we're being listened to, who are sharing screens, slides, messages, monitoring streams. All of that is digital skill, and that we very much now need to be aware of. And so quite often we see the end product, but we don't necessarily know about all the steps in between that are happening to get the event to look the way it looks for attendees and their experience. And so I think that there is a real opportunity here for the events industry, event planners and organizers to upskill themselves on how to manage, modify, customize certain technologies, because it will save your company money, because you won't necessarily have to pay to outsource this kind of assistance. But it also means that you can move in a much more agile way. If you have some internal resource that knows what they're doing, you could change elements really quickly. You don't have to rely upon your event technology partner. You don't have to rely upon that outsourced talent. It just allows you more flexibility, convenience, and freedom. But I think wider than that, we've seen the event technology sector grow. And I think there's going to be lots of opportunity for event managers and planners who want to be paid very well, because if you know what you're doing, there is also that, but want to also be a go-to resource within the events industry for virtual and hybrid events as it pertains to the technology and the digital skills specifically.
Absolutely. And that is such great insight there. Thank you so much, Ashanti. And to this point, I wanted to bring in a topic that is top of mind of any virtual event planner and anyone that is in that space of organizing virtual events: engagement. Now, we are all asking the same question. How do we engage the audience? What do we do? And so my next question is for Michael. Michael, can you tell us about the strategy, tools, and vision that you had for the event in terms of engaging the audience for your MICE virtual show?
Certainly. I think for audiences attending an online event, the content experience is really the most important. So virtual event components are no longer, or should never be an afterthought, right? They must be strategically implemented and be at the forefront of that virtual experience. I did speak previously about the kind of live experiences we brought in to engage the audience. But I think it's also important to in a way look at the virtual model as a tool to be able to create and forge larger communities around an event. So it's not only the event per se, but what you can do pre or post. And I think that's the power of the virtual event. For example, like just taking an example right now of Who Below, right, and what we are doing right now. The engagement starts before because we can make connections, and carries on after because, like you said, we can always rewatch certain videos. You can rewatch content and share those content. So it gives us a lot of ways to re-engage audiences, retarget audiences, and carry on that conversation and that relationship. Beyond I guess at the industry level for Singapore Tourism Board, what we have done is also we introduced something called the Events Industry Resilience Roadmap. Essentially, this is a toolkit, in a sense, a blueprint for putting hybrid and virtual events into action. So it serves as a document to help guide, and it's co-created with the industry as well, and to help guide the industry to look forward and to reimagine business events for the future, right? Where we can then augment both the live and virtual elements together. So in essence, I think what we are trying to do is, I don't think we will ever give up live events, because that's I guess inherent and important for entire industry. But we can always look at creating better opportunities for engagement through using virtual platforms. Yeah.
Absolutely, I definitely agree with that, and I do agree with that. I would like to say mindset or vision that you set in advance, that this is just not about the engagement during the event. It is a life cycle, right, of the beginning, the middle, the end, and then the further continuation. And if you approach the planning process and the engagement strategies and tactics with that in mind, then it can definitely bring significantly more opportunities and connection. So my next question is for Jane. Can you tell us about the engagement tactics and strategies that you used for your event? What were the objectives and goals that you had in place, and what did you do to implement in order to hit those goals and objectives?
Yeah, for us, really, it was about still providing this opportunity for the educational content, because that's critical to our event, but also networking. But like you and Michael were just saying, it was having that long-term engagement as well that we really wanted to achieve. We knew that would be possible through a virtual platform. So for us, the way of doing it was to release just a little bit of content just before to help get people onto the platforms, start the conversations going. And then we left the content up for a month and a half so people could go back and view the content. We did keep sending out promotional messages to say, look, please engage, look, it's still there, don't forget, you can connect. And we're now looking to kind of use some of that content. There was so much content, to put it on our YouTube channel so other people can see what our event is about and share that education, because we got so much of it. During the actual event itself, we were also really keen to try and keep people talking, having conversations, not getting bored in front of their screens. So we had the kind of traditional gamification, which is now traditional on virtual platforms. But through the program, we actually added in little surprise elements. So we had people doing chair yoga, Zumba class, pocho dancing. We had a quiz about Singapore as well, just to wake up our audience and make it feel like we were actually together. We closed our event with the staff singing "What a Wonderful World," which kind of left us on a real high. We'd been worried we wouldn't have that kind of family feel that we have at our events, but we managed to do that through those little elements.
I love that. I love that. And I think it's so interesting that, you know, we often approach virtual events with this perception of, oh, I don't think we'll be able to achieve this. And we can achieve it. It's just about identifying exactly how and implementing it in the way that, you know, will really resonate and create that connection within the audience and specific audience of your event. So some wonderful ideas and tactics that were used there for sure. Now, a lot of engagement at an event, a lot about it is simply trying to create a connection between the content and the audience. That moment when something resonates enough that people react and they take action by commenting or taking up whatever tool in place is there to engage. Ashanti, my next question is for you. Can you tell us what you have observed in terms of trends with regards to engagement at virtual events? What are some examples you have seen that have really worked from the events that you've delivered?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, first of all, it's about ensuring that the content and the agenda is engaging in the first place. It's really hard to engage people in topics that might not be relevant to them, because I think it's less about the topic being uninteresting and more about whether it being relevant to individuals. So especially if you're talking about business events, you know, maybe you're looking at the trends that are coming up in the next 3 months. Maybe you are covering key and major challenges that your attendees are experiencing, where you will be able to solve a specific problem for them. I think that's the key, making sure the content and the agenda are actually relevant and on the nose for your attendees, because that increases their chances of turning up in the first place and intently paying attention to the content. The second element of that, and I've spoken about this in the past, is that you need to select and or train engaging speakers. So there are lots of speakers who are used to delivering content in person, and quite frankly, even if they've done it for a number of years, they may not have been that engaging in person either. So it's really important to think about that as a skill set now. It's not just about topic area, but it's also about their delivery, their presence, their presentation. Can they read a room in the virtual context? Are they able to, off the cuff, engage with people, pick up on something that's been said in the chat box function? Are they easily put off? You need individuals who are totally in control of that piece of content delivery, and their end goal and vision is to keep the audience engaged and not just quite simply to rush through some slides or deliver some content. So I think that's the second element that I've seen that has worked particularly well, is by actually having skilled speakers who are charismatic, who understand human interaction. And then I say the third thing that I've seen work quite well is by baking in those touch points, those response points into the content itself. You did it brilliantly a moment ago in the transition, whereby you talked about the poll. It's those kind of things that will keep people engaged collectively in your virtual event. And I think it's also really important to mention the fact that, you know, engagement metrics will look different for each event. For some organizers, it is about how many people turned up. For some organizers, it's about how many people clicked and downloaded a particular file. For others, it's how many people engaged on a particular poll or on social media. How many people have opened emails and gone right through to the landing page. There are different metrics that you can use to measure engagement and the success of engagement in your event. So it's really important anyway, I think, in the first instance, to know what your metrics are and then engineer the actual experience so that you get those results. And if you don't get the results, I think sometimes that's not always a bad thing, because that could also be a message from your audience about what it is they want from your event.
But, you know, as all the points you were saying are absolutely spot on, and I agree with every single element of it. But, you know, if someone just came off the street, came up to you, said, oh, I'm an event planner, and just asked you one question, right? Well, how do I make a virtual event engaging? And you had to give them a sentence as an answer. What would you say to them?
Make sure the event matters to your attendees.
Love that. Absolutely. Make sure it matters. Purpose, everyone. You have to have a purpose. The purpose fuels the commitment and the intent for the engagement that you're going to get out of a virtual event.
To add to that, Sabrina, I think it really is about continually asking yourself, why does this matter? And ask yourself again after that answer as a team has come out, why? But why does this matter to delegates? But what? Till you get down to that granular reason, and then you design the event around all of those whys, because that increases your chances of being able to communicate the whys in your marketing, but also to design the activities, the event around those whys.
I love that. It's not just one why. Everyone keeps telling you, find your why. It's find your whys. Like, keep finding it. Keep finding a multitude of whys in your virtual event. That is what you should, number 2, take away from this session. Now, this brings us towards the last segment of this session, which is going to be all about data. So this part of the discussion is going to be based and move towards our favorite topic right now, aside from engagement, which is data. With virtual events, one of the biggest opportunities is the data that we can collect and use in order to create better virtual experiences and events, as well as better hybrid experiences. I know we used to do it with in-person events, and virtual and hybrid is no different. So my next question is for Jane. Jane, what were the metrics that you were tracking with your event, and what were some interesting findings? Is there anything additionally that you would track at your next virtual event or do differently because of the data that you got from this event?
I think it was amazing how much data we were able to get. It's almost mind-boggling as to what you can get, really. The key ones that were really useful for us was what we could provide to our sponsors. It was a new area for them as well, but we were able to say that we can tell you who's clicked on your advert, we can tell you who visited your stand, we can tell you how many people downloaded your brochure, how many people were on the platform during your symposium, who viewed your session afterwards, recorded. So much that we wouldn't be able to provide at an in-person event, and that's something that's really valuable and helps us to keep them on board as future sponsors for our events when they see the value to participating. And then from our perspective, it was really important to know which sessions people were watching, whether they were watching live, whether they watched the on-demand session afterwards. So which are the most popular sessions, which we can use going forward for in-person or hybrid events to say, right, these are the most popular, these are the ones we're going to give the key slots to, or the biggest room to, if we get to an in-person event. So we had greater knowledge on that. And then also being an international conference, what was useful to see what times people were logging in, because we had people in Asia, but we had people in America. So thankfully it worked reasonably well, because we knew the Americans get up early. So it's like, yep, they can have their live content, but that's really useful for planning going forward as well, for us to understand the timings.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jane. Absolutely. So much data. And Ashanti, as an event technologist, this is definitely an area that you thrive in, and you are full of great insights and opportunities. So can you tell us a bit more about the opportunities available to event planners and what they can potentially track and analyze from their virtual events?
Absolutely. So Jane, really picked up on quite a few of those things, because here's the thing, the beautiful thing about virtual is that you can create more 360 partnerships and experiences with your sponsors and media partners, because maybe with your in-person event, you were offering them, 1, 2, or 3 days in-person coverage and reach. But now with virtual, you can actually extend this beyond the key event dates. You can use things like your mailing list, your social media, you can host smaller events, you can do so many things beyond that. Now, to be able to leverage that and create those mutually beneficial experiences that you're able to monetize, you need to know, A, what data you're collecting, you need to know where the data is, you need to know how you create data, because these things don't just happen by chance. You can engineer the data that you need to produce for your sponsors as well. So I think those are the key opportunities. If you're not able to almost prove and show, and the brilliant things about virtual events is when we talk about data, we're not just talking about followers on a social media platform. We are talking about these very real things that Jane touched on: click-throughs, downloads, attendance, how many calls are booked if you're using something like a calendar link, how many meetings were booked and actually conducted. There are so many metrics that you can choose and use in order to create the data that you need to be able to show return on investment as a company for running the event in the first place, but also to those sponsors to say, hey, this is why our audience is the right fit for you. Because, and actually, I just really would like to add one thing here that is so key, to be honest, to get the most from data, is creating community. Because I just used the word audience, and I actually think we need to move into talking about communities, because communities are connected, they're self-sufficient, they generate content and engagement by themselves, but that produces data that you can actually use. The challenge with if you've just got an audience is that they're usually, not very active. And so the data you're getting is quite 2D and one-dimensional. And really, to leverage and monetize data, you need it to be dynamic and immersive. And really, that's what communities produce. So I will backtrack and clarify that. I think first focus on creating community, and then engineer the data and the results you want very, very intentionally.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Absolutely. Community over audience. Let's just switch audience out. Every point that I said audience here, let's just switch it out and call it community.
It's easily done, because I said audience, and I thought, well, we need a bit more than that,
Absolutely. Completely agree with that. And well, we are living in an increasingly digital world, and so it's important to be able to know what one can track and how it can be used for future events. And now I'm going to end the discussion with our lovely panel with a question for all three of you, and we'll start with Michael. What has been something surprising you learned about virtual events that you want to share?
I don't think there's anything particularly surprising, but rather it kind of reinforced the idea that running a virtual event is not easy. It really requires strategy and deliberation, again, emphasizing and going back to the point that it's just not a copy and paste. It's not just a transition of platforms, but it's a holistic consideration of different behaviors of how delegates engage on a virtual platform as opposed to a live event. It's about creating that ease of ease of navigation. The platform needs to be intuitive, right? And the way they interact with it. So again, user journey comes up much higher because it's, I guess, in a way, you have to cater to a larger base, right? Because in a way, people have used technology differently. So it's again just not a simple copy and paste. I think that's the greatest takeaway I have. The other thing is that again, I said it previously. Although we did have pretty good success and achieve in a way our KPIs in terms of this recent virtual event. Many attendees still express that keen interest to return to live events and to return to Singapore, and that's something that I cannot emphasize enough. That our industry, our MICE industry, is built on that live connection, and businesses and partnerships are brokered through that personal touch, right? And like what Ashanti was saying, the need to develop that community is really important, especially now, right? As when borders are closed, we need to connect in different ways, and virtual events gives us the opportunity to do so.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michael. And Jane?
I think for me personally, I was actually a little bit surprised at how much people committed to attending a 3-day event. We knew people would dip in and out, but actually committing to watching live hours, especially when they weren't necessarily very friendly hours. And I think actually Singapore were quite forward in their thinking, because I know some of our medical professionals, they were actually given the time off to attend a virtual conference like they would have been had it been in person. But I don't think necessarily each country around the world is so forward thinking in that side of things. And the other thing was really how we were able to keep that ADI family feel that we have to our conference in a virtual environment. And that was a really lovely bonus.
Fabulous. And Ashanti?
Well, I'm not going to sound surprised by virtual events, but I do think that it is, I think what will be good to see is organizations and companies realizing how flexible virtual events are. So not just viewing them as a 2 or 3 day event. These can be used for marketing, digital marketing. They can be embedded in some of your BAU marketing strategies and your community building activities. So that would be great to see companies do, because it's a much more agile and flexible way of building community and building your reach as an organization. So not many surprising things. I think the reality is, when we're used to doing things in a certain way and something as unexpected as COVID comes along, there will be various responses, both negative, neutral and positive. So that really wasn't a surprise overall. But I also think it's brilliant. Maybe a bit of something interesting rather than a surprise is that the growth in event technology, the sector itself. There are now well over 300 companies, and new ones are coming to the market every single day. So that is something that probably no one could have predicted, is that sector really starting to grow its own legs.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ashanti. And yeah, I'm going to now share the results from our 3 poll questions that we asked. And of course, if anyone has anything to add to the answers, which I think I also expected the answers to be that, please do. So the first question we asked is, have you had to make the move to running an in-person, running an in-person event to running a virtual event in the last 12 months? So have you had to make that change and adapt? And 100% said yes. So we have a very engaged, targeted community and audience here today. The second one was, do you think that virtual events are here to stay? 58.3% said yes, and 41.7% said, no, I think hybrid events are the future. So interesting that they are quite similar, but not a single percent said I hope not. So that's a great, great thing. And our third question was, what has been the most challenging part of organizing a virtual event? 80%, I guess the winning percentage said the engagement, and 20% said the time taken. So those were the two most challenging parts of organizing a virtual event. So for everyone that participated, thank you so very much for doing so. Now, I've just got some questions come in from the audience that I'm going to ask. Right, so I have a question from Irina Graf, and it's for Michael. If you had 1,000 attendees at your virtual event, do you still see value in exhibiting at another industry trade show? Yes or no, and why?
Thanks, Arina. Definitely yes. I think, it's still our remit to exhibit in other shows, because the connections we get could be different. It depends on what show we are attending. Also, the objectives and priorities expand beyond just our own shows, right? And I think going back to the fact that we can hopefully in the near future, as things hopefully fingers crossed get better, we can then establish live connections. I think it's really important that although the virtual space has come a long way, the live connection, the live touch would definitely be still really important. So I don't see it as a replacement of one or the other. It's an augmentation, right? It's about engagement, participating in other trade shows to continue the engagement, and then having our own to augment the experience. So it works hand in hand.
Thank you so much, Michael. And thank you, Irina, for the question. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. This brings us to the end of the session. A huge, huge thank you to Jane, Ashanti, and Michael for joining me in the second and final installment of the Singapore Spotlight series. It has been a pleasure delivering this series in conjunction with the Singapore Exhibition and Convention Bureau. So thank you again. Thank you, Ashanti. Thank you, Jane. And thank you, Michael. And thank you, everyone, for joining us here today.